you, Lena, for that introduction. And thank you all for joining us for our reflections today on these topics. I'd like to just make some points by way of background and then discuss Northern Ireland, Northern Irish conflict and peace process as it relates to some of these themes. By way of background, as Lena has explained, we are involved in multiple projects within the broader UK Global Challenges Research Fund, Research Hub on Gender Justice and Security. And the idea for this event grew out of discussions about what ties together the three different projects that we are working on that Lena has outlined. Part of what ties those together is that in different ways they are addressing major forms of structural injustice, the world historical crime of colonialism, major socioeconomic inequalities in the form of neoliberalism, and unequal gender relations in the form of patriarchy. They are not the only form of structural injustice. Racism stands out as one we have not explicitly named. They are not the only world historical crimes, but there are three worth exploring. Drawing what others have said about these wrongs elsewhere, they're structural and ideological in nature. Iris Marion Young's posthumous Responsibility for Justice highlights features of structural injustice. It is experienced as constraining, it is positional, it is reproduced in action, and it often leads to unintended consequences. Critical thinkers from Marx to Brown have underlined the nature of ideologies. Ideologies portray the interests of particular individuals as if they were universal interests. They naturalize or reify social structures, or even worse, make them invisible. I discussed this topic with a certain degree of trepidation. My own background is quite legalist in nature and concerned with how we interpret legal norms in a way that is deliberative, inclusive, and participatory. But there are, of course, many limits to that approach. And so I have to say that many other people have dealt with these issues from the benefit of greater experience and insight. And I draw on them, including, of course, many of the people that we have been fortunate to interview for our research project on Northern Ireland. So I'll be drawing on some of their insights over the next few minutes. Reflecting on those insights, there are some links I would highlight between the topic of neoliberalism and economic inequality and the other forms of structural injustice my colleagues are discussing. One of the striking economic interpretations of Northern Ireland by Michael Farrell, but not just by Michael Farrell, is how sectarianism and political difference were used to play off socialists and working class, unionists and nationalists, Protestants and Catholics. This tactic of separation is reminiscent of many colonial strategies. See Thoreau's excoriating critique of British imperialism in India, fostering division between Muslim and Hindu. What is also striking from several interviewees is how when community development work becomes professionalized or money is given to local bodies to invest, women are excluded from spaces they previously occupied in civil society and the public sphere. So this takes me to my second half of the presentation. Where does this concern fit with the history of the Northern Ireland conflict? Economic interpretations of the Northern Irish conflict are but one set of interpretations among many different competing ones. Other interpretations include those focused on internal factors, like the divided political and social nature of Northern Ireland. The terrorism criminality narrative, often linked to claims of foreign interference. The independence struggle narrative, again, often linked to claims of foreign interference, and so on. The economic dimensions of the conflict don't always attract as much attention as some of these, but there have been important arguments and debates, some of which highlight the complexity of the problem, and that sometimes interference by foreign economic actors has not always been negative. There is a suggestion, for instance, though a disputed one, that concern about foreign investment in the 1960s may have led Prime Minister of Northern Ireland, O'Neill, to shift the focus of unionism temporarily in a more reformist direction. Whatever the truth about that, the reality was that any reform was too little too late and did not carry sufficient unionist support or address adequately the demands for civil rights in the 1960s. More concretely, the 1980s saw the development of the Mcbride Principles, commitments by US firms not to invest in Northern Ireland unless problems of employment discrimination against the Catholic nationalist population are addressed. Combined with detailed criticisms provided by, amongst others, the Standing Advisory Committee on Human Rights, this led to the strengthening of the laws on fair employment, banning religious and political discrimination in Northern Ireland, and most notably the Fair Employment Act 1989 and later Fair Employment and Treatment Order 1998, introducing sophisticated and distinctive affirmative action measures into Northern Ireland. The Good Friday Agreement, 1998, offers differing perspectives on the social and economic dimensions of the conflict. In one part of the agreement, there is talk about economic, social, and cultural rights, but in others, this is limited to social and cultural rights. And when it comes to the details, the very important details in the parts on rights, safeguards, and equality of opportunity, these all become economic, social, and cultural interests and not rights. The agreement does include provisions on equality of opportunity and some support for participatory governance. At the same time, the agreement speaks about sustained economic growth, promoting social inclusion, new regional development strategies. Many of these are fairly generally worded, and as one of our interviewees explained, vaguely worded clauses allow those with power to interpret them. And this has come to pass. Part of the social problems in this jurisdiction have included a failure to deal with housing needs, which particularly address the Catholic and nationalist population, though there are also housing problems in Protestant unionist loyalist areas. Discrimination in housing was one of the sparks that precipitated the conflict in the 1960s. For most of the past 20 years, the approach in relation to addressing housing needs has been to rely on non-state bodies to deliver social housing and offer some support through the private rental sector. It is literally only last week that the minister responsible for housing announced new plans for the main state body to get back to the business of building social housing. Similarly, as one of our other interviewees noted, one of the major crises which destabilized political institutions here was tied to the conservative and liberal democratic policy of austerity and the introduction of welfare reform in 2010. So economic inequality and assumptions typical of neoliberalism to at least some extent shape our context and have the potential to disrupt our progressing in transitioning from conflict and division. And here I have to signal some worries about how effectively legal strategies like human rights and transitional justice can address these issues. There were some provisions in the Good Friday Agreement and subsequent agreements which promised more on equality and participation. And yet they have not been delivered, or as one interviewee put it, when delivered, they have fallen into the trap of being done in such a proceduralist way, with such an emphasis on process that it denudes them of any transformative potential. All is not negative, though. Our interviewees stressed the importance of civil society members, trade unionists, human rights groups, and others working with each other and different types of alliance in order to further their agenda. They stressed the importance of being prepared to adopt different strategies, including indeed legal strategies and litigation, and most importantly, being aware that delivering on social and economic transformation is a matter of never giving up the struggle.